I'm joined now by Lucy Perez, Senior Partner at McKinsey & Company and Global Leader of the McKinsey Health Institute. Lucy, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Such an honor to have you here today, of course, inside the building and on the show. And what does the data show you about the state of women's health?
The state of women's health is one of great opportunity. This is what gets me really excited, especially being at a place like the New York Stock Exchange. Some of the work that we've done highlights that there's a 1 trillion economic opportunity each year from closing the women's health gap.
Yeah. How should companies, investors, individuals be leaning into this opportunity?
Well, the reality is everyone has a role to play in taking advantage of this opportunity from closing the women's health gap. For investors, it's a massive opportunity to drive growth from investing in new products and services that help close this gap. For pharmaceutical companies, this is an opportunity to drive more revenue from products that meet the needs of women that currently are going unmet. One of the things that really has struck me is that women spend 25% more time in poor health than men do. And so helping close this gap is a great opportunity for investment.
And of course, we know that McKinsey always comes powered with the data and analysis to back these findings. Is there enough data on women's health? And of course, something that would go beyond just the data gathering organizations.
Addressing the data gap that exists in women's health is absolutely critical, because what we found is one of the reasons why there's this gap is because we have not been asking enough questions about, are there sex-based differences? Are women, for example, responding differently from men? And this shouldn't surprise us. Women have different biology. We're talking about not just different reproductive organs, but we're also talking different genetics, different chromosomes, different hormones. And so all of this begs the question of asking, looking into the data to understand what are those differences and how can we use those differences to drive better innovation, better diagnostics, better treatments.
What would be your advice to women watching this show and wondering, how can I really take charge of my health?
And taking charge of your health is the number one advice for women, right? It is about, you've got to be your own strongest advocate, right? Yeah. If something feels off when you're going to your doctor, ask, probe, because the reality is that there's still a lot that physicians have not been trained on around these sex-based differences. So it's really important for women to make sure they're asking, is there data on women specifically? For example, if I'm suffering from migraine, we know 80% of migraine patients are women.
Wow.
And this is an area where we do not yet know a lot about what are those sex-based differences and how they could impact better treatments for the women who suffer from migraine.
What are the initiatives that you're spearheading as the global leader of the McKinsey Health Institute?
Yeah, so at the McKinsey Health Institute, we're very excited about collaborating with the Global Alliance for Women's Health that is bringing together more than 50 organizations globally in the public, private, and social sector with the goal of closing this gap. So it goes all the way from looking at the data. Do we have the data that we need, right? Are care protocols being updated to reflect these sex-based differences, right? Are we making sure that we don't treat women as a monolith, right? That we understand the differences that may exist in different geographies, different demographics. And so all together, because again, everyone has a role to play, can help close this gap and drive economic opportunity.
What are some of the most persistent health issues that you see among women? I know you mentioned the migraine data point there, but anything else we should know about?
There's a lot of different things. The first thing we should keep in mind is that women's health is not just those conditions that impact women uniquely, but it's also those conditions that impact women differently or disproportionately. And so when you look at these categories, I think of heart disease. It's the #1 killer of women in this country, right? And we know that in many instances, it manifests differently in women than it does in men. So this is part of the reason when we look at the data, we see women are 50% more likely to die following a heart attack than men are. This is a massive difference, right? So with the evidence that we have in hand, there's an opportunity to change both how we're training providers, how we're putting protocols in place in emergency rooms, right? How are we developing drugs and interventions that better meet these needs and help get to better outcomes?
I know this is a question that you may or may not have insight into, but of course we've heard about tariffs and trade policy adjustments. We're here at the New York Stock Exchange. It's been impacting markets. Pharmaceutical companies have been a focus at times. Is there anything there that would have an impact?
A lot of people are asking this question, watching the headlines that are changing quite rapidly. And I think right now everyone's trying to wait and see a little bit, right? Doing a lot of planning. I think there's some concerns that people have about the impact that the tariffs may have on drug pricing and the ability to invest in new innovation. And so clearly there's a need to make sure that organizations are understanding what are those potential implications because they can be quite varied.
The Health Summit kicking off here at the
Yes.
New York Stock Exchange this afternoon. Lucy, what do you want your takeaways to be from today?
Well, the first and foremost is, a real desire to take even more action. We know that investors, we need much more investment going into women's health. The amount of R&D dollars going towards women's health today is pretty low. We're talking about less than 5% of all R&D dollars. So seeing more investment across the private, the public, and social sectors in women's health is my primary goal.
Lucy Perez
Yes.
joining me in studio. Lucy, thank you so much for all the work that you do, and of course joining today. Lucy is the global leader of the McKinsey Health Institute, as well as senior partner at McKinsey & Company.